Bonus shorts for book 2 of Rick and Morty. First, there's Don't Look a Gift Horse in the Rick. Aw, Rick's going on an adventure with his daughter for once. He says that it doesn't get much better than this, and rather than just using her for running errands and putting her in traumatizing situations, he's just bringing her here so she can enjoy the sight of a beautiful alien planet. But this is a dark comedy, so of course there's going to be bad stuff happening any minute now to make her regret going here. At least in the doofus Rick and Jerry story, nothing terrible happened. Beth says it's beautiful, and Rick says with a funny expression, "Only the best for my girl." He already admits that they make a good team, and he should take her on full time and fire Morty. What took him so long if he's already enjoying her company this much when she presumably just got here? He likes her a lot when it comes right down to it because she's his daughter, his pride and joy. But my assumption for why he doesn't just go on adventures with her and not Morty is that he doesn't want to subject her to all the stress of it. He really didn't think of that when he was supposed to be a genius? Then what took him so long? Also, he needs Morty brainwaves around him to mask his presence from his galactic enemies, but I guess he forgot about that. He just said this on a whim. I can't really blame him because that's not the only reason he has Morty go with him. She lampshades that they don't spend enough time together. We really did need a story like this to show all heartwarmingly how Rick really cares about someone other than himself. After all the villain balls he's been handed in the comic. He briefly jokes that he's only here for cookies, and fortunately reveals he was joking, and she fortunately had faith that he was joking instead of being annoyed or upset with him. And he says her cookies are great while trying too hard to sound hip, and then they hear a noise behind them, and some evil horse aliens come out of a spaceship right behind them, and reveal that they know Rick personally. Rick amusingly says, "I wondered if you ding-dongs would ever catch up with me." He says he has no idea where the amulet is because he sold it years ago. And it's hilarious how deadpan and non-afraid he is. He's so confident and reckless. Hey, that's like Sonic. If he was actually funny. If this was Sonic, he'd be smirking and just be annoying. But Rick starts out just being deadpan and not take him seriously for legitimate reasons. And only then, after the horseman has a hilarious but relatable angry reaction, only then does he brag that he spent the money on a prostitute in another planet. I chuckled there. Beth's arrogant enough to think she can reason with these guys just because she's a horse surgeon. Rick fortunately lampshades it, saying, "What are you gonna do, take their blood pressure and charge them thousands of dollars for it?" That's another time I chuckled. Rick fortunately puts his hand on her shoulder and laughs a little and says that's cool and he's just messing with her to lull the horsemen to a false sense of security so that he can surprise punch them. That was smart of him, especially since the guy had a big ray gun, so he needed to wait until he was distracted. Really, these Beth and Rick adventures should be happening way more often, like, I don't know, every 4th story, because they have a great dynamic, much better than him and Morty's. And it's necessary to show the villain protagonist as Beth so that his soft side can help us forgive him. Sure, the adventures could be stressful to Beth, but moments like this make it worth it. He steals his ray gun while killing him, and I giggle when even at a time like this, he tells Beth that he's very proud of her career and she's the best. He doesn't do that for Morty. He didn't have to do that for her. But this does contradict the show where he revealed that part of the reason he hated Jerry was that Beth had to give up her dream of becoming a human surgeon when he got her pregnant, and she had options that all died because she felt sorry for him. He said all that, but he's still proud of the career she simply settled with? That's nice of him. Sure, that was the show's Rick, but nearly every Rick is the same somehow, so it applies to him too. Maybe he's just humoring her. She realistically covers her ears while taking cover from lasers. I always appreciate it when they're lasers instead of gritty bullets, but both are equally non-threatening. He says amusingly, "I am doing something, Beth." I giggled again. They're in a really threatening situation. Rick just gave someone a painful death, but it never ceases to amaze me how he talks like it's not a big deal at all. And we know that it is, so it doesn't completely detract from the tension. He says that she could lend a hand with a ray gun. Really? He trusts her to do that? He snarks that she's an expert in horses, and thus this should be fine, but because she's against killing horses, which he should have known about, she hesitates even though that's clearly not a normal horse, and after she avoids getting hurt, she cries and defends herself. Rick had plenty of time to just shoot the guy for her, and logically, in all the time she was vulnerable, she would have gotten killed. She was lucky she dodged it all. Instead, she somehow expected to do it, despite constantly remembering being trusted to take care of real horses. And then we see her remember having to do that later in the surgery room. I always wondered if horse surgeons really exist, because it felt like it was just a job that was just a joke at her expense. Well, that was a great story until the ending, where the writing fell apart. It is a good explanation for why Beth doesn't go on adventures with Rick very often. She chooses not to because they always turn south. And while it was unlucky that the aliens showed up, I can easily believe that happened because Rick's made so many enemies with the way he acts, and it's been all over the universe. Still, I can't help but feel like the ending being so needlessly mean to Beth ruined the story. Why does it have to be like that? Why do they have to never go on adventures? Now for Pocket Mortys. I remember hating the Pocket Mortys story arc because it was needlessly cruel to Morty without him doing enough to deserve it, and to take that to Pokemon. How am I gonna know the names of every Morty so that I can talk about all of them? It's not like there's a text box over each one the first time he shows up saying his name, right? A Morty with a suit in the woods is out of breath, and he wonders if he and the other Mortys woke him up. A dog Morty says that Rick never wakes up. I guess because being a drunk makes him lucky enough to be a deep sleeper. And that's what he meant, and he wasn't being literal. It was amusing that the cowboy Morty was like, "Geez, take your time, veiny Morty." Because that was a silly name, and you expect Morty to be nicer, not like Rick. Veiny Morty says that someone spotted him by the arcade flips and chits machine, and he managed to lose them. At least the story is trying to provide some subtle comedy by the visual comedy of trying to make every Morty look silly. Veiny Morty says that Rick was the one who saw him. Why on earth did he not recognize a Rick? I guess his Rick didn't have a lab coat and hair like a starfish. But the fact that he had a Morty with him should have made obvious who he was anyways. He just says he must be a new trainer. Why does he think that? Then they all get caught up with by Rick, who's with a Morty that confusingly looks just like our Morty. And he inexplicably says they gotta catch them all. Why? This is why the series of stories sucks. There's no explanation for why he wants to do this. It's just a memorably ridiculous villain ball. All the Ricks here are the most evil we'll ever see them. It's purely the meta logic that is calling out Pokemon being immoral, when they could have easily explained that this Rick needs the Mortys for their masking brainwaves to hide him for his big plan later. He doesn't even say that he needs their help. He just wants to make them fight each other. Ricks can get new Mortys from the Council of Ricks whenever they want, so it's not like it makes sense for one to try to recruit a whole bunch of them against their will. If he wants cannon fodder, why doesn't he just clone his own Morty a bunch of times? Then he can make them fight each other, and it wouldn't be as bad as taking previously established Mortys from their families and homes to fight each other. Well, I can kind of understand the appeal of wanting to see who will win in a fight. It's scientific curiosity about who's the best Morty when it comes to combat. How else would he find out? He doesn't do enough to explain this though, and it's still barbaric, as Morty tells him. Especially if it involves a fight to the death, which wasn't always the case in Pokemon. Well, I refuse to believe you didn't kill the Pokemon you fainted when they were wild Pokemon, because come on, they would have been eaten by predators, even if they did just faint. Trainer battles weren't fight to the deaths though. I choose not to believe that this is our Rick and Morty, or even the comics pair. And that's not so crazy because most Mortys look the same in the first Evil Morty episode. They didn't even try to differentiate them a lot of the time. And we saw a pair of Rick and Morty that looked just like ours, but weren't in the beginning of the Ugly Morty arc. I can kind of accept this by not thinking this is our Rick. And come to think of it, Rick has done a lot worse things than trying to see which Morty is the best fighter. Maybe he's trying to see which one is the most reliable to turn to if he needs the most capable Morty ever. But that falls apart too because he could always just improve on his own Morty, like give him battle armor, super strength at the very least. He could make him drink another alien egg in case of an emergency. And the amount of effort it'd take to eventually find the best Morty for fights wouldn't be worth it at all. In fact, if there's an infinite amount of universes, and therefore a really huge amount of Mortys, shouldn't it be obvious to everybody that it'd be impossible to catch them all? But I guess he didn't actually mean literally because he's not an idiot and was just using it as a cheeky reference to Pokemon. It is at least sweet to see Morty stand up for the Mortys and stand up to Rick. He says, "Aw, geez, Rick, look at these poor guys. They just want to be left alone." And that's how he would like it if he went around making a bunch of Ricks fight each other. Actually, I'm smiling at the thought. Until I remember that this franchise insists on having gore in it, which ruins the fight scenes when it shows up. Rick actually lampshades that Morty would be lucky if a bunch of Ricks agreed to follow him around all day, and they wouldn't even need Mortys, as Ricks make their own rules. Somehow the Mortys waited until now to think to run away. You know what? These idiots had it coming. Maybe that was the writer's plan. It's so frustrating that they didn't think to run away the minute this pair looked at each other and got into a long conversation with each other. Not to mention one of them saying to run for it was probably the whole reason Rick was reminded that they're there and sick the Mortys he caught on them. Well, it is interesting to see all the different creative designs for every Morty. I see that was part of the appeal of Pocket Mortys. No wonder they made a video game about this. This is the kind of thing I only started appreciating just now when I started reviewing the comic though, because here I'm supposed to write about everything bad and good. And that means I have to notice that this is a really good thing. There's a Morty with two cats looking brave, another brave one with a beard and leather jacket, but an overly silly Morty face on his shirt clashing with it, and a Morty with way too many heads, which fortunately Rick lampshades how hard he is on the eyes. It was funny that he admitted capturing you is a terrible idea. But one, no way he wouldn't have realized that immediately after seeing it. But I guess he thought he had to capture him to test the might of every Morty. So fine. I guess it was a split-second decision. That also has to be why he doesn't immediately release him after saying this. It was amusing that he said he needs a cowboy Morty, as he's complimenting his appearance for once. And it was sweet of veiny Morty to put his hands on the cowboy's shoulders and reassure him that it'll be fine, and the other Mortys don't look so tough. When they do. At least they look brave, trying to be badass. So it's not like every Morty forced to fight is cowardly and desperate for it to be over, making you feel sorry for him. Then suddenly out of nowhere, Rick meets up with an alien who's actually another Morty trainer and wants to fight using his hammerhead and bed cheat Morty, as well as his big foam costume Morty. I guess that guy's really ashamed of his real appearance. This really is a wacky alien dimension. I don't buy that anyone other than Rick would be making Mortys fight. Only he would have run into other Mortys, let alone so many of them. How do you ever convince other people to start trying to find out which Morty was best at fighting this way? They're not interested in Mortys. I guess you offered a substantial cash prize. I wish the scientific curiosity over which Morty's the strongest was explained as the motive of all the trainers from the start. Because them simply wanting to catch as many as possible makes no sense on its own, being ridiculously daunting for no reward. Is there a Pokedex to fill out? No, from what I remember. So that's a missed opportunity. The Council of Ricks could have one of those. Wouldn't Rick have a Pokedex? Wouldn't that be the whole point of this? Why does Rick choose two cat Morty of all people to start fighting those way tougher looking Mortys? Shouldn't it be obvious he should choose literally any tougher Morty on his team? What makes Pokemon great is the intuitive yet complex type effectiveness chart. It's not super basic like in Paper Mario, but it makes sense if you think about it. What the hell is the type effectiveness chart for the Mortys? Because I don't think there is one, because I'm not seeing any clear elemental theming with them. I guess it'd be terrible for a video game, because it's so unintuitive and hard to remember. But it gives me respect for the writer to see them trying out every type of Morty design except elemental ones. The Mortys from before huddled together as Rick's easily distracted by the trainer battle, with the dog Morty being sympathetic, saying that he doesn't want to die even at this point. The yellow-shirted Morty runs to them and tells them that if they keep going north, there's a portal out of here. Why would Rick run down the battery leaving his portal open? Also, Rick can bring himself back from the dead with a tiny machine chip and like cloning technology. Wouldn't he do the same thing for the Mortys? So it wouldn't be as bad and irresponsible of him that he's making them fight and fighting them, because he would just make clones of them. So if he killed them, then they would just wake up in a clone body and be fine. It would actually make more sense than Pokemon then, where, oh, they just faint after being hit by a Hyper Beam. It was sweet seeing them all hug the normal-looking Morty at once and thank him. And he says that us Mortys have to stick together, right? Problem is, he's saying this right behind Rick. Literally not even 2 feet away from him. How the hell does he not hear everything they're saying right behind him? The comic should have made it clear that Morty was just whispering, like with the text bubble looking different. And there's no way that Rick would call one of his Mortys Morty, because that can mean anyone. Was that the joke? But it's not lampshaded. Then out of nowhere, we see Jerry show up on an alien planet with a pink sky right behind Rick. And he casually says that he's pleasantly surprised to meet Rick here. Yep, definitely not the Rick and Jerry we're used to. It'd be less confusing if they had differently colored outfits, but I guess I should just compliment the comic on assuming its audience is made up of smart people, instead of people who need the visual guidance and can't come to the conclusion on their own. But it's still stupider writing to have every single version of them all wear the exact same colored clothes. So this alternate version of Earth has aliens like Blurg walking around on no big deal, and Rick isn't questioning it. And Jerry likes Rick over here, and the sky looks way prettier. Either that or it's just sunset. Jerry asks with a nervous smile if he's seen any Mortys lying around. Lying around. And reveals that the Mortys he's talking about are the ones we saw at the beginning of the story. And they ran away while he was asleep. I assumed it was Rick. Why? Even Jerry was making Mortys fight? Even though Jerry's her biological father? This is the same kind of person who, in the show, eventually admitted that Pluto wasn't a planet and got the crowd to go from adoring him to hating him purely because he loves his son. Definitely an alternate Jerry. It can't be that this Rick brainwashed everyone on the planet to be okay with helping him out in his scientific curiosity with Morty's here, because if any Rick was able to do something as overpowered as brainwashing, he would have been taking advantage of it at literally every opportunity, and it'd be a huge storybreaker power, and he'd probably take over the planet. Well, how do I know he hasn't taken over this planet? It's clearly not the Earth we're used to, so it's clearly not the Rick we're used to. Jerry wants to get some Mortys for himself, as I seriously wonder why he's okay with making other versions of his son beat each other up. Sure, Rick probably makes really good instantaneous healing medicine and sends it everywhere, like the syringe that heals a broken leg instantly in the pilot. But no one says that, and still, he knows that the fighting would put the Mortys in pain. That's his grandson. Pokemon actually expects us to believe that Pokemon like fighting each other. Like they like testing their might against each other and respect their trainers for winning a lot of battles. Traded Pokemon even require gym badges to be obedient. This isn't running off of those rules. So it's like a shallow parody of Pokemon. But that's far, far more realistic instead of treating me like a complete idiot. That was just a tacked on way of excusing Pokemon being cockfighting, because come on. First off, they're wild animals. I'm sure they wouldn't have the intelligence to, respect gym badges. And when you catch a Pokemon in a Pokeball, they immediately go from fighting you to being on your side without being able to disobey you. Even if they act disobedient because you don't have enough badges and they're traded, they still can't attack you. That's brainwashing. So if the Pokemon are enjoying fighting each other, it would only be because they were brainwashed into it anyways. But here, that can't be the case, because how could brainwashed Mortys choose to run away from their trainer? No Pokemon can do that on its own. Brainwashing is actually more merciful, because then the Mortys would be enjoying being made to fight, like the Pokemon. So it wouldn't look nearly as cruel and callous because they'd be consenting to it, even asking for a fight. That's what Pokemon is. They wouldn't just want to be left alone. But again, Rick has to be incapable of making brainwashing happen, because otherwise he would have brainwashed them so that they'd stop resisting this idea and running away, because their whining is just annoying him, and them running away would annoy him. If Rick was really sadistic after all, he'd laugh when Morty was calling him out being sympathetic to the Mortys. He'd enjoy it instead of being annoyed at pity, and he definitely brainwashed Morty into not calling him out on things if he could. So he can't be doing this just to be sadistic, because then he would be way worse to Morty. In fact, we didn't see him force the yellow-shirted Morty to fight at all so far. I guess the writer thought that'd be way too mean. Morty was talking as if this is the first time he's ever seen Rick force Morty to fight. Because knowing Morty, he would have given up on calling him out on an evil deed after the first few times. Like when Rick was a drug dealer, he gave up on complaining by the end. So that proves that this is really recent and not a long-standing tradition on this alien planet. But then why is everyone used to it? It can't be Jerry has a really good point when he says that he wants his actual son with him, but Rick has a good point when he says that Morty's his sidekick. The story surprisingly ends right here, with all multi-Mortys heads telling Jerry they love him and kissing him, while Jerry looks terrified. That was kinda chuckle-worthy. Okay, the story isn't irredeemable. There's gonna be a whole Pocket Morty story arc later. I'm just bothered that they didn't explain the whole premise of the story. I really want it to make sense. Obviously, this is on an alien version of Earth, and Rick is making kidnapped other Mortys fight each other out of scientific curiosity to try to see which one's the strongest one. Actually, it'd be much harder to believe that no Rick ever would have done this, because Ricks are evil. You'd think the Council of Ricks would want to compare all the Mortys they can so they could see which Morty was the best at which thing and so on. Like, which one was born the smartest. That could benefit them. And this is the only way to learn which one's the strongest. This could have been explained as Rick carrying out a task from the Council of Ricks. And that would also establish right away that this isn't our Rick. Instead, the story was confusing, frustrating me with giving Rick and even Jerry insane villain balls. But I was able to love the story for the various creative and amusing designs of all the Mortys, and how Rick was stood up to. Like, I definitely found it funny. But Rick really should have explained himself a lot better than that, and we needed to know why anyone other than Rick was okay with doing this. The words cash prize are all that would be needed to explain this. After all, greed is a really common motivator. Even then, it'd have to pay a really good deal for trainers to be okay with this instead of the police stopping it, which they logically have to do. But to be fair, we didn't see any cops in this story. And there's apparently no type effectiveness chart. Although you could say one was a fighting type, and the biker one was a dark type. Wouldn't it be obvious that the Karate Morty is the strongest one ever? Actually, all Rick would have to do to find the strongest Morty is find which one has huge muscles compared to the rest. Maybe he can't find any like that. More likely, he doesn't just want to know which Morty's the single strongest. He outright wants to make tiers, see which one's the second strongest and third strongest and so on. Again, I wish he said that because it'd obviously be impossible to catch them all. And of course, Rick's already annoyed enough by one Morty as it is. Why would he ever think he needed another? Mecha Morty. Oh, this one sounds cool. We start out seeing Morty holding a lever in a mecha shaped like himself, naturally saying that he doesn't know what he's doing. Already I'm amused. It's so sweet of Rick to want to make a mecha look like his grandson instead of looking like anything else. Although I don't like how creepy the blue soulless eyes of the mecha look, and the way its mouth is just a solid wall of steel instead of trying to look like teeth. And as usual, I don't like seeing blood, let alone seeing it around the mouth of a giant monster or its tail. The Morty mecha gets punched, and Rick mocks him for it snarkily, and surprisingly reveals that he has a lot of money riding on this fight. And some alien beside him says that Morty's going down. That's an interesting subversion, because I thought that Morty was being a hero fighting against the bad guy. Because that's the kind of thing that tends to happen when a main character is controlling a giant mecha. Also, how reckless and callous are Rick and the alien to not care that the mecha's having this fight in the middle of a populated city, right next to some skyscrapers? Couldn't they have had their fight in a place like a huge field with no one in it? Do they want civilians to get hurt? I mean, I guess the logic is that it'll cause easy extra damage to the opponent if the opponent gets smacked against one of those buildings. But how is that worth it? And again, I keep mentioning this because it's really important. Rick can steal money by warping to a bank, vault, or mansion anytime he wants with a ray gun, so why is his entire plan here revolving around getting money? Couldn't he just use a ray gun to vaporize this alien and steals money? Though I guess that vaporized his wallet as well as the rest of him from the convection. I mean, couldn't he just beat him up? That'd be smarter. How long did it take him to build this mecha? Rick amusingly says that most people would be grateful to have a giant robot version of themselves made up. And it's amusing how he calls him a crybaby because it totally misses the point, which Morty fortunately tells him off for. But why would a genius like Rick call the mecha a robot? It's clearly not because it's being piloted by someone. Morty must be speaking through an amplifying microphone to get heard by Rick when he's all the way up in the head of the mecha, because I don't see any headset on him. And Rick at least does have a headset on, so we see why Morty's able to hear him from so far away, because Rick's speaking into a microphone. But Morty doesn't have one, so, huh? Rick at least tries to justify that grandparents do weird things when they see their own demise coming. But making Morty battle an interdimensional fighting championship is pretty extreme. And I'm pretty sure it's illegal since we clearly see that there are people in those buildings. Unfortunately, Morty apologizes. The mecha gets sprayed with red gunk, and Morty's surrounded with steam, and says that the controls are down and he's a sitting duck. Fortunately, Rick plans on saving him, as he presses a button and reveals that he can remotely activate a crude attack of the mechas, which was inspired by when Morty stunk up his ship the other week. I'm surprised that Morty can talk before he gets destroyed. All that's left of the mecha is the head. So it's a good thing he was okay and able to crawl out of the broken eye window. Surprisingly, the story ends there, with Rick being happy that he got some money. I thought it was going to lead to something that mattered. And it wasn't even that funny. That's the problem with it being just a short. All I tend to remember about it was how dark it was and how upset Morty was. Now for Jerry decoy model. Beth says she's off to work and asks Jerry to take the laundry out of the machine. Jerry says he's busy, Beth is sarcastic, and Rick says that he's gonna borrow Jerry because he needs him to be on the lookout for some jerks sniffing around his secret stash. It must be a really easy task if he's trusting Jerry with it instead of Morty. That's weird. I can imagine the only reason he doesn't make Jerry suffer through his dangerous adventures instead of Morty when he hates Jerry is that he can't be bothered explaining it to Beth if Jerry dies. But the same can be applied to anything happening to Morty. And we usually see that Beth hates Jerry, so she cares more about Morty. That's why it's good that they explain that he needs Morty's brainwaves to hide himself. Rick pushes Jerry into a portal when he said no, explaining why Morty doesn't just say no to adventures. And Rick says that a missing Jerry would just tip people off that he's on to them. So he leaves the family with a Jerry decoy model, which can be switched on and off. So naturally he says that it's better than Jerry because he's so annoying. He says that he's pre-programmed the infiltrator with 1,000 hours of Jerry's dumb conversations and behavior, so no one will notice a thing. 1,000 hours? Wow, he really took a lot of time making this. Even 100 hours sounds like overkill. I think people would notice a thing if it can only speak in pre-programmed conversations that would become outdated. Like you wouldn't be able to talk about any current events. He really is prepared to have thought he'd need to spend all that time making him. But being prepared makes perfect sense, because if anything ever happened to Jerry, he'd need to make a replacement so that Beth and the kids wouldn't get upset. When we saw Beth divorce Jerry in the show, she spent the whole season depressed about it and she ended up taking him back. So surprisingly, she wouldn't want him gone. Since the family is so used to Rick's antics, they're surprisingly able to warm up to fake Jerry right away when he sarcastically calls Jerry's balloon cell phone game Busy Plans, as they all laugh at his joke instead of being creeped out and distant from him. We cut to later on, and Beth is stunned that fake Jerry thought to cook dinner for her. He also kisses her on the cheek. And Morty walks down the stairs thanking him for helping him with his homework, and wants to play translator and wear the conductor's hat like he said. And fake Jerry wants to blow the whistle. Rick either didn't do a very good job when he said 1,000 hours of Jerry's behavior and conversations, so what the hell is this based on? I guess he gave it the free will and sentience to decide to be its own person. That's some glitch. Maybe it wasn't a glitch and he wanted a better Jerry to cheer his family up. If it was a worse Jerry, they'd want to get rid of him and want the old one back. Summer runs upstairs crying and gets comforted by fake Jerry over some high schooler drama. He compliments her because she's upset that a guy turned her down and someone knew about it. She hugs him, calling him dad, even though she knows he's fake. This is a dark comedy, so ever since Morty started to thank him, I assumed something terrible would happen to this guy. Jerry has his hands on the shoulders of Beth and Summer as he sits between them on the couch watching TV, with everyone being happy, and he says that it's a perfect evening with his perfect family. I guess Rick was too lazy to just make a robot to guard his stuff instead of trusting someone as incompetent as Jerry. The next day, we see fake Jerry serving his family a fancy French meal. Why are and la fused together as the same word on normal Earth? And why isn't they accented? I expect French mistakes from Sonic, but not a series with better standards. Beth says she could get used to this, and Summer says she's got a pass because she has to run to get the bus. Fake Jerry puts his hand on her arm and says he'll drive her and Morty so that they can spend more of the morning together. I guess he values his family more because Rick sees Jerry as having his only purpose in life being be a husband and father. So the robot Jerry is more dedicated to and appreciative of his only mission. That's all he knows. While the real Jerry is whiny because he wishes his life turned out differently, maybe he preferred to be rich and famous. So he's more self-centered. Then we see Rick go through a portal behind him with a bruised Jerry, telling him to stop squirming as he cries out. Beth's upset with Rick, actually concerned about Jerry for some reason, and Rick says that Jerry brought this on himself because he can't even successfully look straight ahead. So someone jumped him and snagged Rick's stuff. I hope he gets it back. I guess Rick was so lazy that he deluded himself into thinking even Jerry wouldn't let this happen, but of course he did. Even smart people can end up making mistakes they kind of see coming because they're too lazy to take precautionary measures. Rick gets suspicious because his family wants to keep the Jerry bot. And he looks in the head of the Jerry bot because he was smart enough to make an easily openable panel in the back of his normal-looking head to let him do that. He sees that this Jerry's personality settings are up way too high, and that's why he's such a good person. Rick's unsatisfied with him because he's not enough like Jerry, and that misses the point. So he casually presses a button to destroy him. And Rick lampshades that blowing up what looks like his son-in-law isn't cathartic, but of course it's not. It's not the real Jerry, and it's a good Jerry. Well, Beth did say that she's not saying get rid of the original Jerry. So maybe Rick's logic was that he'd hate to have to look at two Jerrys for the rest of his life. And maybe a part of why he can tolerate Jerry is that he knows he's better than him and he makes him look good. So he feels self-conscious and irritated at seeing a good Jerry that the entire family likes. And he'd be jealous that his family likes his creation more than him. We should have just seen the plot progress to that point after he briefly tried to humor them. But instead he's destroyed before things can end naturally and fully take advantage of the concept. It's frustrating because it makes Rick look like a callous idiot. You instinctively want to see a version of Jerry that's actually good and worthwhile. And that would be an improvement on the status quo. But a Gary Stu-like perfect husband and father would get annoying after a while from the audience being jealous that they don't have someone like that in their lives. And his presence would make the real Jerry all the more annoying. If the plot lasted longer, we would have seen better justification for Rick doing this, because he would have been jealous and irritated by him being the perfect husband. We needed to see that because that would help explain the question of, why doesn't every Rick replace Jerry with a Jerry bot like this? Because you get jealous. If Beth and his family are so okay with this, and Rick doesn't like Jerry, you'd think making a version of him that he doesn't hate so that Beth can have a great reason to divorce Jerry like he wants would be the obvious solution. So it has to be that he would hate a perfect robot Jerry too. That Jerry bot was already the favorite in the household, and Rick would have hated that. In 'Twas the Night Before Rickmas, we start out in the dark with Jerry going after some milk and cookies at night, only for Rick to stop him. Rick confusingly says that the cookies and nog help keep the peace, and Santa doesn't just do this out of the kindness of his heart. Jerry naturally teases Rick about believing in Santa Claus. But this is a sci-fi fantasy universe where anything could be possible, so Rick believing in him automatically means that he's real in some way. Now I have to seriously question how Santa being real in this universe isn't public knowledge of everybody. If he was real, he would have been caught by now, whether it's by the many kids who stayed up, or even by a camera. Jerry would have to be especially ignorant to think he's just made up then. The only reason he'd think Santa was made up in a universe where he's real is if he was, in fact, a character from a made-up story on Earth, who just happened to be real by an amazing coincidence. Rick tells Jerry that it's his funeral, as I wonder how many people suffer the consequences of doing what Jerry's doing. A lot of people don't bother leaving out cookies and milk at Christmas Eve. There's a whump sound. A tired and annoyed Santa falls down the chimney as Jerry's all happy and excited to talk to him, being an annoying fanboy and talking way too much. It is realistic that Santa would be annoyed and have bags under his eyes if he has to do so much work in one night. But he's walking at normal speed. Logically, he'd have to be moving ridiculously fast to cover every single house that rode to him in one night. Actually, Sonic would make a way better Santa Claus then. He's only moving at normal speed for the sake of Jerry having the time to say all this stuff. Like asking to help him and saying he should sign his Ewok village. Rick rats him out as the one who ate all the cookies. And of course, Santa reveals himself to be an alien because it's Rick and Morty. So he grabs Jerry with a long tentacle tongue, as I wonder how him being like this isn't such common knowledge that even Jerry would know it. At that point, Jerry would have been afraid of him from the start. This kind of thing would be caught on camera eventually, and that'd make the news. Doesn't Rick not want to be bothered to explain Jerry's death to Beth? And yet he ratted him out. It's amusing that Rick says that this doesn't sound like one weird-looking name, but it could be another one with a grappling hook accessory. Oh, at first I thought he was talking about which kind of alien it could be because he was mentioning weird-looking names. And I assumed he was planning on helping Jerry because he naturally wouldn't want Beth to get upset over Jerry's potential death. If he wasn't like that, he would have gotten rid of Jerry himself a long time ago. Instead, it turns out he's just shaking his own Christmas present to try to see what it is based on the sound. Then Rick happily gives Santa an alcohol flask to make him leave, saying that he does this normally. And he's happy that he got a toy from Santa with a name that tells me nothing. I guess the reason he prefers alien toys with weird names is that he's a hipster and prefers non-Earth stuff over Earth stuff. Because he knows a lot more about Earth's problems than other alien planets' problems. And so the alien planets all seem better than Earth. They're more interesting to him. This story interpreted Santa as an alien who attacks anyone who he discovers ate his cookies and milk on him. But if this is the world where he's real, it just makes it hard to believe that Jerry wouldn't know he's real already. So it makes it confusing, and I was distracted the entire time by wondering how he was never caught, when this kind of thing would have happened a lot. Well, I'm glad this story wasn't all in song form like A Christmas Carol, which I thought about when I saw the title.